Is everybody sitting comfortably? Yes, it looks so. So let's be punctual and say good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen, bringing some diversity to this room, to this morning. We are happy to be here at the British Embassy in Helsinki and together with PwC. And my name is Pia Erkinheimo, and I have the pleasure of being your facilitator this morning. Yesterday it was Minna Kant's Day, a great Finnish female author, and we all had our Finnish flag celebrating that. So I think this is a great continuum to discuss here about well, technology and diversity in many forms. But let me first have the pleasure of introducing and welcoming on the stage British Embassy, our Majesty's Ambassador, Tom Todd. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you for us being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pia. And Tervetuloa tässä seminaarinaisia teknologisia. There we are. Just about right. That's all right. We're obviously very keen to support a seminar on women in tech. And the question is, where are all the women in tech? And the answer is they're all here, in fact, in this room. So just a few words from me. First to say, it's a very bad idea to start a speech with an apology, which is I have to go to Lapland in about 5 minutes. So I'm afraid I will be zooming out of this room. But we are very pleased to be hosting this with PwC. The diversity agenda is very important to the British government, both at home and internationally. I actually work for the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office was the last organisation in the UK to require women to resign when they got married, because that was in 1975. We couldn't conceive of women actually having a job if they were married. It was absolutely impossible. Now, things have really changed since then, since about half the workforce in the Foreign Office now are women. In fact, half the workforce in the civil service actually are women. And I'm pleased to say that of the 6 last ambassadors here in Helsinki, half of them were women. So we've made some progress since the past. We still have a bit further to go. I was also actually thinking a bit about my own family and whether there are any women in my family involved in technology, and the answer is absolutely not. I also recall that there are no men in my family involved in technology either, so it's not a disgrace of discrimination. But actually, I was thinking a bit more on history, and actually the first woman in tech was Ada Lovelace. I don't know if you've all heard of Ada Lovelace, who helped develop the computer in the 19th century. And I think she was the harbinger of women in technology. She was actually the daughter of Byron, who was, as you probably know, a famous British poet. But she had a very frustrating time in life and ended up wasting her talents as a mathematician trying to cheat at gambling and died as a young person. And I was just thinking, if we had a more diverse Victorian era, what she could have achieved, actually, as a woman and contributed to developments at that time. But on that point, I wish you well with this event. It is very important for us. It's good to have you all here together. I hope you benefit from our guest Juliet, who's here as well, who's come to talk to you. And thank you for coming to Finland. And have a great seminar and have a good time. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Good.
Thank you. And I let you now fly to northern parts of this country. And then I have a pleasure. I think it's great, to have kind of a handsome men in the beginning, in the morning. So we'll continue with those. I'm sorry of being like a bit of a stereotyping now in the Me Too times. So Mika Salo, partner from PwC, please.
Thank you, Pia. You made me blush with your introduction. First of all, thank you very much, Tom and British Embassy. I think you will all agree with me to be very pleased to have this event here in this wonderful setting of British Embassy. So thank you very much for having this event together with us. My role at PwC is leading what we call PwC Digital Services and Technology Consulting. And me being in consulting, I tend to think that we are in a business of good ideas. That's really what we do. And being in the business of good ideas, I've had the opportunity to work in various teams with various degrees of gender diversity in those teams during my 20 plus years in this industry. And if I look back, I can clearly say that the teams that have more women, they perform, I would say, significantly better in the technology space. And here's why. I think that those teams where there are more women present, they inspire and tolerate wilder and more out-of-box thinking in their work. That is clear. The second thing is those teams also apply a more human-centric thinking in everything those teams are doing. And thirdly, and I think most importantly, at least from my point of view, those teams are much more fun to work with. So that's my experience. So being in this sort of technology space, I'm really happy to see you all here, and I'm kind of desperate for having more women joining this very interesting branch of industry, and hopefully we can inspire younger generations to join us in this field. So warmly welcome to this event. I'm really looking forward to some lively discussion and really learning about the aspects of women in technology. Warmly welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Petri. And now it's time, I think, to first start from our guest overseas, as they tend to say, I think, in the UK, about us. So if you allow, let her, Juliet Webster, give her thoughts about this women in tech, and especially, you know, from the point of view of diversity as a business advantage. And if I may make a brief introduction, what you also saw in our agenda, she's a very kind of eloquent researcher and a business leader, and currently in her sphere is mostly, if I understood correctly, in London Business School. London School of Economics. This is us not attending those schools. And we actually met only this morning, so please give your background as well. And tell me, and tell us first, if I may, how did you end up originally with this topic, women in tech? Because this is something like that, we all like to understand the journey to this sphere. You know, what was the driver? And if I may make an example, for me, talking here about women in technology is not actually an easy task, because I was afraid to be labeled that I might have some kind of a agenda that has to do some other motivations than just what I love, which is technology and business life. So the reason why I'm here is actually that I got a business challenge on my table. And as the times have gone by, so I can be very precise now, I worked for Nokia those days, and we did smartphones, and that was one of the category. And we had a dilemma because Nokia brand wasn't lucrative for women. So we had a business case. If women would buy as much Nokia smartphones as men, our sales would increase with 22%. So this was kind of a business question. Before that, I would, as a younger person, I would hesitate to tap into these debates, because I thought that, you know, then they think that I'm kind of promoting like a feminism, or using words that were too big to my mouth, at least those days. But it was a business case. And, you know, that was it. Okay, this is intellectual, this is good for business, this is good for the shareholders. So that brought me to this topic. And ever since, I've been kind of stuck with this one, because mostly I work with men. And sometimes they need, from the business purpose, the point of view of you know, how 51% of the population actually works. And that's why I ended up being a co-founder of Women in Tech in Finland. Again, an organization where I worked was contacted, and I was the only substance woman, being like that. The other women were very talented, but in the domain of legal and communications and marketing. So that was my story. And I wanted to share with you and encourage you also kind of think, it's so rare I can work with teams in technology where there would be, I wouldn't be, the minority. And I'm kind of used to it, and I kind of like it. But oh boy, those meetings, or girls, those meetings where there were four women talking about technology. That project was not only in time, it got finished before its time. So, but that was my story. Please, the floor is yours for the next 25 minutes or so. And we agreed that if there is an immediate question, our guest speaker it can be interrupted. But if not, you have thoughts, we've reserved some time to discuss with both of our keynote speakers. So maybe however you want to pose it, but now that's my guidance for us to behave. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for having me. Can I start by asking, how many of you are in technological professions or careers who didn't study technological subjects? How many of you came in through another route? Quite a few of you. Quite a few of you. Well, I am not a technologist. I'm a social scientist originally, although I did study eventually in a department that combined social sciences and engineering. And today what I'm going to talk about is not just the entry points of getting women into tech. I'll talk about that a bit, and I'll talk particularly about a particular aspect of technological work that especially affects women and is gendered. But what I was invited to talk about today was the other aspects of digital work that actually go beyond what we conventionally think of as ICT professions or computing professions. Because recent technological and organisational developments, I think, have forced us to rethink what we mean by ICT work and to rethink what it holds for us in the future. So some of what I'm going to say might seem slightly beyond the concerns of this audience, but there's a reason why I'm highlighting some of the issues I am for us to consider where we're going next, or where some of us may be going next. I want to point particularly to several things that I think have been going on in the world of work and technological work, what I'm going to call digital work today, which includes ICT professions, but actually goes much wider than that. So I think the growth of the internet and freely available Wi-Fi is one dimension of what's changing the world of work. The relocation of work, too, through offshoring and outsourcing, and latterly the growth of AI and robotics. But it's the first two I really want to focus on today. So what I'm going to do in this presentation is to, first of all, define a little bit what I mean by digital labour. I guess some of you can't see the slides, can you? You people sitting over here, if I'm standing in front of my notes, are you struggling to see?
It's okay.
Okay. What I'll try to do is to think to move, but please shout at me if there's something you want to look at. Or I can go and stand over there, says Annie, so I'll do that.
You have to film me when you want a slide.
Lovely. Okay. Good. That's much better, isn't it? Everybody can see now. Okay. So what I want to argue is, first of all, or second of all, there are gender divisions in the digital labour market, in the digital world of work. We all know this, don't we? Here we are sitting here, women in tech, one or two men. But this is not the normal picture, as I'm sure you all know only too well from your professional lives. The normal picture is rather the other way around, that there might perhaps be one or two women in a sea of men. But for the moment, we're all together female-dominated, and that gives us an opportunity to explore some of the gender issues of this world of work. Now, what I'm going to argue today, though, is that there is a pattern of gender disadvantage in the world of digital work, which is becoming, I would argue, normalised across the whole world of work. So some of the conditions that very many women have worked in over the last decade or so with the emergence of the internet are now becoming, I would argue, mainstreamed. Having said that, I think women remain particularly vulnerable to some of the developments in work that are occurring. So bear with me, because I'm going to take you through what I think those are in a bit. What I particularly am concerned with, and you may recognise this from your own lives, is the way in which the boundaries between work and non-work are becoming progressively blurred in terms of the place that work is done, the time in which work is done, the blurring interface between work and leisure, the fact that we can do all of these things on our devices and sometimes all at the same time virtually. There are concerns about what that means for us as individuals and socially too that I want to raise today. And finally, I want to argue that some of the publicly promoted solutions that we've all been involved with are also rather saturated with gender norms, which I think we want to get away from. And again, I'll come back and explain that point later on in the presentation, so please bear with me. What I'm going to do today is to draw on some work that I've been doing. What I just do is move the... Thank you, so that I don't rattle it. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is to draw on some work that I've been doing over the last few years with colleagues across the EU in a network looking at what we call the dynamics of virtual work. And for the purposes of that network and for today, we came up with a definition of digital labour. Labour, whether paid or unpaid, so it can be work that's done in the home using our devices, or indeed on our devices not in the home, labour, whether paid or unpaid, that is carried out using a combination of digital and telecommunications technologies. But the last line is crucial, and or produces content for digital media. So we're not just talking about people who use computers, we're not talking about people who develop computing systems or telecommunication systems or digital technologies. We're talking about content producers as well. And that takes us into a huge terrain of online workers right across the globe in a variety of different occupations. It's a very wide-ranging field of work, and the technological landscape, I think, has changed over the last 5 or 10 years, what we might call a digital labour-scape, for want of a better phrase. And it's the gender issues uncovered in this digital labour-scape that I want to talk about. So it's not simply computing work. It includes computing work, it includes ICT work, but it also includes things like call centre work, content creation, ICT journalism, new media work, app development, gaming. I would even include within it things like printing your own boarding passes when you're travelling. Work that used to be done by employees is now being done by us, by the consumer. Or, as the phrase has it, the prosumer. So, thank you. I think there are several features of digital labour that I am particularly concerned about, and I'm going to draw your attention to today. They're not the only features, but they're the things that might give us pause and might make us think a bit about where we're going to as computing, new media, tech professionals. The first feature that I want to concentrate on is the fact that it's performed usually remotely. Remotely from the client, remotely from other colleagues. It can be distributed across a global value chain. So if you think about things like branch plant working or globalized organizations, you have whole new sets of workers whose place of work can be quite geographically separate from the people they're working with. Organisations, colleagues, and so on. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is that very often, and this may not apply to you at all, but it does to very many people who are now taking up tech work, it's precarious very often. It's done outsourced through online platforms. It's done by freelancers. It's done by interns. It's done unpaid some of the time, so not even through employment at all. And finally, it blurs the boundaries traditionally placed around work. So those sort of boundaries are starting to become ever more fluid. So thank you very much. So the first thing to say about it is that it's dislocated. So the workplace is now, we know, in multiple locations, even in deck chairs. We know about the call centres that we all deal with who may be on the other side of the world, who are dealing with our phone bills, our travel inquiries, our utilities, no matter what. That's one aspect of the sort of the global value chain that has been created by digital work. But perhaps we also recognise the phenomenon of the train or the plane or the bus that we sit on as we go to work, and everybody's on their devices, and it's not clear whether they're communicating with colleagues, sending work emails, messaging their friends, gaming, whatever. But what they're doing is working remotely, or they could be in a cafe, or they could be in their home. We can work anywhere now, and we do not have to be anywhere near our colleagues a lot of the time. In 2014, a consultant called Matthew Ball, who was one of the principal analysts in a big tech consultancy, said, based on current trends and changes in working culture, almost all information workers will have the option of working remotely by 2022, with the main means of communication being social media and video conferencing on mobile devices. Well, I think we're already there, long ahead of 2022, and I don't know whether that's your experience of work, but it's certainly mine. Yeah. Now, the gender division of labour, as this slide suggests, I think I'm good for a second, is, oh no, I can go on, thank you, is rife in ICT work. Now, I'm sorry, this is absolutely terrible. Perhaps one of you tech experts would come and help me sometime. Cut and paste lovely diagrams out of PDFs and into PowerPoint. I've never ever got the hang of it without the thing becoming horribly blurred. But you get the general picture. The blue lines are men, the orange lines are women, and these different vertical bars represent the different countries of the EU. And this was scientists and engineers in the labour force by sex. And Finland is... It's so blurred, even I can't see it close to.
Okay, so
it's quite high up. This is Denmark up at the top, and Sweden, and then I think
UK is that one?
UK is probably that one. Yes, UK is that one indeed. I looked at this yesterday and found Finland. I'm not sure if it's here.
This is Finland.
Oh, you think that's Finland?
Finland?
Well, there you are. This is 70%, and the blue line is the male line, and
so
here we are,
30
30-something percent.
Yes.
Now, this is science and technology professions overall. It's not only tech, but it gives you a sense of the huge gender imbalance across the whole of the EU, with the signal exceptions of the countries we all look to for our social democracy, namely Denmark and Sweden. So we've got gender segregation in digital work just as much as in any other field. And what we know is that, for instance, software developers, gamers, new media professionals are predominantly 80% male across the EU. And as we all know, oh, thank you very much. So they're male-dominated. On the other hand, we also know that offshore information services work and what we call click work, which is the sort of tiny, minute activities involved in things like rating online services, tagging photos online, that kind of thing, which I'll talk a bit more about, is overrepresented women. So I think that virtual or digital work done remotely, to some extent reflects and extends and entrenches quite long-run occupational divisions of labour between men and women. And can I have the next slide, please? I think we've gone a bit forward, so can we go back? Yeah, I think we're about it's gone out of control. And no. That's it. And what we've all heard about recently, particularly as the Me Too campaign gathers momentum across a range of sectors, we now know that with that imbalance between men and women has come a huge and emerging issue of sexual harassment and unfair dismissal and so on. You know, gender disadvantage, gender discrimination, quite actively being perpetrated and written into the activity of innovative big companies in Silicon Valley, certainly. Hopefully not in your organisations. Okay. The second feature of digital work that I want to just concentrate on for a moment, with the proviso that I think this may not apply to most of you, but I really want to hear if it does afterwards, please. So please do shout out. And that's the precariousness of a lot of this work, because labour insecurity has become a very strong feature of the labour market in most Western economies. And this has been noted by an economist who worked for the International Labour Organization, Guy Standing, who's written quite widely about what he calls precarity, and I'm going to call precariousness, because precarity is sort of quite it's not an English word, I don't think. It's particularly commonplace at the margins of the labour market, and particularly applies to women. And I'm going to argue that today's digital work particularly exemplifies that problem and that condition. It's a key characteristic of digital work, some kinds of digital work. So we have a situation where very many people are now working freelance or on short-term contracts in insecure positions. And I'm thinking here not so much of the kind of technological work that maybe you do, but for instance, new media occupations, which are largely, at least in my country, and maybe in Finland too, staffed by people who are on very short-term contracts indeed, who get their work through their personal contacts and through sort of backdoor entry points, very antithetical to equal opportunities, so have a marginal labour market position. They're very poorly, if at all, represented by trade unions, precisely because they're not full-time, lifetime employees. So they have uneven pay and contracts, vast amounts of gender pay inequality, low pay, sometimes no pay at all. There's a huge growth in a phenomenon of people feeling that they want to work for free because it might gain them an entry point into the labour market, into some kind of exciting media position. And this whole growth in internships that's been particularly marked in the British economy is one aspect of that. So poor employment protection and employment rights, informal recruitment practices, and people feeling that they're on their own, individualised and individualistic, and needing individualised coping strategies. And the fact that they're feeling that they need to cope as individuals without the aid of any kind of collective organisation tends to mask what is actually a sort of structural, systemic pattern of gender disadvantage in these occupations. And I think of these occupations as being every bit as much concerned with technological work as, say, writing code or doing app development, because all of these occupations are now becoming so blurred as the labour market is changing and as technology is changing. And people who used to consider themselves to be journalists or media professionals are now working a great deal with computers as they do so and doing a lot of their own tech work. So, you know, those boundaries between occupations are becoming ever more fluid as online work gathers pace. So that I think exemplifies and normalises a kind of pattern of gender disadvantage. Now, again, this is perhaps, it's unreadable in terms of the text, but this set of graphs is taken from the Resolution Foundation in the UK, which mapped the growth of precarious work in the UK. This top graph refers to agency workers, so temporary workers employed through agencies. Here we have part-timers. These people are workers on 0 hours contracts, and these are the self-employed. And the figures are from the year 2000 to the year 2015. And the point is, and I hope you can all see the blue lines and the fact that they're actually going in an upwards direction in all 4 cases. Can you see that? Yeah. So the point of this slide really is just to underline the argument that I made a moment ago, that in the UK at least, and possibly in Finland too, there is now this huge growth in what we might call precarious employment. Not only among women, although women have been particularly vulnerable to forms of employment that don't carry good, solid employment protection, but it's now becoming much more spread around the labour market. And I think it's exemplified in digital work. And just a little cartoon to entertain you and to underline the point that low pay is becoming sort of normalised. And rather than bring women's pay up to the level of men's pay, there is, perhaps this is slightly tongue-in-cheek, but the point is being made about the strategy of reducing men's pay to women's pay. Now, we can think of virtual work or digital work as a form of social reproduction as well, and by that I mean that we're all kind of reproducing our social lives and our social entities every time we do digital work. In several senses. First of all, that the consumption work that we do when we check in online or we shop online or we do anything else that involves work as a consumer, we're substituting, by doing that work online through our mobiles or whatever, we're substituting for labour that was once done by employees in call centres or in travel agencies or in shops and so on. And the way that AI and robotics are going forward, I think we can only see that process become more and more accentuated. And social reproduction, I'm going to argue in a minute, is highly gendered. It's something that is, it's a concern of us all, but it carries with it a set of gender structures and labels. I'm sure that as tech professionals, you're all only too familiar with the necessity and the pressure to brand yourselves as individuals, to sell yourselves in your interactions with other people, in your professional lives. It's certainly essential in growing areas of the labour market. It's always been essential in media work. It's becoming essential in academia, where I come from. You make sure you're using social media, you're getting the message out all the time about what you're doing, what you're publishing, what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're eating, but in seeking work in particular. So social and work relationships and personal relationships are all being conducted online, and as we reproduce ourselves socially, we are actually creating value for some of the social media companies. Some of you might be represented here. If you've been following the kind of the story about Facebook and the way it's been harvesting people's data and possibly impacting upon not only the American election results, but possibly the Brexit referendum in the UK, you'll recognise some of this stuff. Facebook and other online social media platforms create their value by the social interactions, the everyday stuff that we do online is what generates their income. So social reproduction is important for us all, but the burden of all this falls, I think, disproportionately on women, partly because women are drawn more than men into freelancing and self-employment as they try to find all the time solutions for the conflicting demands of paid and unpaid work. There's been quite a lot of studies done showing how women in organisations often leave big employing organisations at a certain moment in their career when they feel that going freelance would be much more conducive to them managing the competing demands of their lives. So they're much more likely to get drawn into some of those insecure forms of work that are so problematic. And that may include some of you who may be entrepreneurs, having very positive experiences, but also finding huge amounts of conflict every day in what you do. And I'd love to hear from you if you feel yourselves to be among them. And as I said earlier, women are generally poorly protected by unions, have been historically, although that's certainly now starting to change and for the better. But all of that means that being insecure has not protected women in the way it might have done from some of the sort of negative aspects of insecure work, and they haven't had union protection to help them. And we all pay an enormously high price for, in particular, the creeping entry of work into our private and personal lives and personal spaces. There is a blog by an organisation called Plan C, and they published a blog a couple of years ago now, which was entitled "We're All Very Anxious Now." And what they were talking about was the difficulties we all face in managing the competing demands of all our devices, managing our burgeoning inboxes, managing a sense of insecurity that we all feel about our working lives. And we have more and more conflicted family and personal relationships at the same time as we are told that we have to manage these conflicts ourselves as individuals. So with the falling away of some of our social institutions, particularly in the UK, where we've had a huge decline in trade union power, presence, membership over the last 30 or so years, and a great growth in individualism, all of the conflicts that people face in these newly emerging occupations are having to be managed by themselves as individuals, with a great deal of pressure as a result and a great deal of stress as a result. And people now take individualised strategies for managing what are essentially structural problems. And so many of you will have seen and heard, and possibly even many of you will have read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, which I think sort of exemplifies the this kind of exhortation to take it all on your own shoulders and deal with it yourself, you know, lean in. But there's no sense of collectivity particularly about any of this. And in the research that the research field that I've been working in over the last few years, there have been numerous studies of women struggling to manage the demands around the competing demands that they face in their paid employment. Struggling over time, struggling over their caring work, wanting to engage in the increasing opportunities that digital technologies afford them, to be constantly in touch, but really struggling to balance all these things. So there are reports of time poverty, which are legion in my field, and maybe for you as well. You'd suffer from time poverty. And not only working mothers have time poverty, this is more and more the case for all of us. And it all remains largely wrapped up in the idea that work is fun, and so dealing with it should be unproblematic. And here I want to quote from an Australian researcher called Melissa Gregg, who says, if our labour politics were once premised on the idea of placing limits around work, reducing hours as much as winning rights and benefits, in today's workplace settings, we often aspire to produce an environment actively hostile to the idea of work as laborious, by which she means that we are all trying to consider work as fun. We all want to be passionate about what we do, and that is both necessary because, of course, work is fulfilling and it does use our skills. We do engage in social interactions through our work. There are positive aspects to it. We can be creative, but there's also this hugely negative side as it starts to encroach upon every aspect of our lives, even to the extent sometimes of our sleep. And I've heard of tech professionals sleeping with their mobiles under the pillow, particularly in case they need to respond to something very quickly in a follow the sun time zone somewhere on the other side of the planet. Maybe some of you have done that too. I'm trying not to. So, just to wrap up then, having heard this very glum analysis of the world of work in the gig economy, what we call the gig economy, you may well be thinking at this point, well, phew, that's not me. You may be thanking your lucky stars that none of this applies to you. You're personally not among the weaker members of the labour market, not among one of those who has to kind of scrape together a living by doing little click work jobs through Amazon Mechanical Turk or Upwork or any of those online platforms. Nothing to do with your working experience, perhaps. Perhaps you're more of an entrepreneur than a miserable freelancer. Or maybe you work for an enlightened employer on a full contract and with full employment rights, a fixed salary. So perhaps the scenario that I've just outlined is miles away from your own personal experience. Or maybe you recognise elements of what I've said today. Maybe you know other people who work in ways I've described. Those of you who are doing professional work in the policy sphere or in the tech sphere or wherever you are professionals or as private entrepreneurs, maybe you see little hints of your own situation in the increasing demands, particularly made by paid work upon you. Maybe you recognise that sort of pressure to kind of constantly manage your burgeoning inbox and the difficulties of doing that. Even if you love what you do, you'll be aware that work is becoming increasingly more demanding, it's changing, and the internet and other digital technologies have played a huge role in that process, alongside other more organisational changes. So we may be about to be released from the drudgery of all this, of course, as and when AI and robotics enter our lives on a firmer basis than they currently are. Possibly we may. However, in the 30-odd years that I've been in this business of studying what happens when technologies are introduced into workplaces and how they particularly affect women, even 30 years ago, I remember there were discussions, and perhaps you remember, some of you might remember, discussions about the kind of the rise of the leisure society, the fact that we would all be released from work altogether as microelectronic technologies came into the workplace. Absolutely the opposite has happened. I'm not saying that as we move into a new generation of technological change it won't, but we were promised it 30 years ago and it didn't materialise. I suppose what I'm saying at the end of it all is that what does happen, and whether or not this very bleak scenario becomes mainstream for us all, will really depend on what we do next in order to intervene in the shape of technological change in our working lives. And you, as tech professionals, are superbly placed to shape our future of work with digital media. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet, for your enlightening presentation. Immediate questions or remarks?
I'll stay standing up, actually.
Or please, yes.
Ask you about women and aging in technology.
Yes.
I'm now 46 and I have 20 plus years. Behind me about 20 until my retirement, or maybe 25, you never know.
Yeah, never know.
But anyway, I'm now considered that I'm becoming too old for this line of job. And my friends and relatives are asking, what is your backup plan? When are you going to become a nurse or something else? Any advices or any observations you would like to share?
Whoa, boy. I mean, you're not alone, I'm afraid, and you probably know this. And I guess other women in the room may have similar experiences. The tech industry, if you're in the tech industry, I'll talk about the tech industry now. The tech industry is not only sexist, but it is ageist. And there do seem to be, and again, maybe people recognise this pattern, there do seem to be two kind of pinch points in women's careers where they're vulnerable. One is on maternity. I mean, talking about in tech professions. One is on maternity, where it suddenly becomes terribly difficult to manage the competing demands of caring and the sort of growing demands of doing very full-on demanding tech professional work. So that's one point at which we see a lot of women drop out of tech work. And maybe this is interesting for people who are employers. And the other is at your point in life, the sort of mid-career point where you sort of, you're starting to feel that this is a younger woman's game, or you're being made to feel that this is a younger woman's game. And some women are, there is some anecdotal evidence only, and I don't know of any research that's been done. Jeff might know. Jeff, who is our male colleague here, might know of some, but I don't, of any work that's been done that's tracked the attrition rate of women in mid to late career, mid-career really. But I did once hear a speaker from IBM a few years ago saying that anecdotally she thought that there was a huge exit of women going on. And in particular, that what was happening was that subtly in redundancy programs, women were being singled out or overrepresented, let's say, in redundancy programs, and mid-career women in particular. Now, I'd love to investigate that further. It'd be a difficult one to research, but I think it would be very interesting to know if that's true or not. And the other thing that I do know of is that a lot of women vote with their feet at about your age and decide, as I said earlier, that organisational life is not for them anymore, that they go and change careers and become interior designers and pottery, freelance masseurs and things like that. So what I'm saying is, yes, I think that your experience is not, it's painful, it's common, I think it's probably under-researched and under-measured, so I don't think it's very visible, and it needs to be made visible. I'm not sure what to say. I don't know if I can say what is to be done other than making it visible and perhaps data collection, firm data collection, so that we can expose it, because I think once it's exposed it becomes more up for discussion in the same way that sexual harassment has. And unacceptable behaviour is starting to get out, to be flagged up, to get out into the public consciousness and therefore to be identified as a problem. So, yeah, you're not alone, but don't go and become a nurse if you don't want to be.
I think that from the socioeconomic point of view, it's a huge waste that I would waste my expensive education and then go to study something more, and again, our taxpayers will pay for it.
Well, right, and sorry, just to follow up quickly on that, I'm just wondering, what are you getting a message from your employer that you should start to be moving out, or is it?
Not directly, but the general sentiment is that, and I had a very close friend, engineer, 20 plus years, work experience in various positions. Age was 49 when she get redundant, and very difficult to get into any type of interviews. Only if you leave your age out, then you get chances.
Thank you. And then we have two. Do we have? Well, we'll see now. Two more questions, and then the floor is.
Did you have a mic?
Thank you.
Just using a mic so that we can stream the questions as well. So.
Yes. Here.
Thank you. My name is Sanja Mursu. I work at Academic Engineers and Architects in Finland, which is a union and a labour market organisation and a professional organisation representing about 70,000 engineers and architects and others working in digital media or ICT in Finland, and mostly graduated from the university, so university level degree. And I would like to continue on the data collection, but also on the discrimination issue. We ran a survey last year regarding discrimination and inappropriate behavior at working place. And what I have to check on my notes a little bit, but what we realized, or what we saw from this survey, was that 32% of the respondents had noticed either discrimination or inappropriate behavior in their working place within the last 12 months. 32%. Based on gender, 49% of women had noticed discrimination or inappropriate behavior. And this was particularly high among women over the age of 50. So there is data, and this is definitely not a topic that doesn't sort of touch at all the new sort of equal Nordic countries, but it is really an issue in Finland. And we also have very segregated labor markets in a sense that, yeah. So it's much more higher than in any of the other Nordic countries. When it comes to field of education or when it comes to technology, it's very much gender segregated.
Thank you for your comment. And then for the courtesy of time and your time, please.
Hi, thanks for an excellent talk. My name is Nora Lindstrom. I work for Plan International, a girls' rights organization. And I think what you're talking about in the precariousness of the labor markets. One of my big concerns in promoting our use of technology in our work in developing countries, and in particular in bridging the digital gender divide, is precisely that we are preparing girls and young women to enter digital labor markets that are already biased against them. And they'll be entering jobs such as this type of click work that you're talking about. And we can see that, that girls are being trained in tech, but then they're expected to work in call centers, etc. So they're being sort of trained, but they're entering the lower rung, and they're really, and this whole unequal gender inequality exists in the labor market that they are entering. So I think this was a really important point, and it's very much a concern in developing countries in particular. It would be interesting to hear if you have any further thoughts on that aspect.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, I totally go along with what you've just said. I'm not sure I have anything particular to add, and I know we're probably pressed a bit for time, yes. Are we? I wonder whether we could perhaps pick that up a bit later, because yes. I guess we've got more time.
Well, I think we'll talk after Christina.
Would you mind if we did that?
Yeah. Okay. So one more applause to Juliet. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to invite Christina Söderholm here. And she's working with very exciting things as a transformational leader. Can I describe it like that? But also at Fortum with the head of nuclear R&D. So indeed, really deep in technology, and also with both digital and artificial intelligence sides, but also kind of the more classical technology, I assume. So a good visibility to that. So thank you for being here, and please share your thoughts with us.
All right. Hi. Great to be here. Sorry, I have a flu, so I have to have these Moomin Nessus with me. Great to be here. As mentioned, I'm Christina Söderholm, and I'm actually really amazed that Petri asked me to present here, because I talk a lot about nuclear, and I talk a lot about technology or digitalization or AI or transformation in big companies. I talk about these kind of things, but I never talk about my story. I never talk about me, and now he asked me to share my story, and this is really exciting, and also I'm really nervous. So I've done this once before. That was in West Point in one of the military education centers in US, and I gave the similar kind of speed to young students, female students who were struggling in their studies in this military environment. So at least we are not there. I think our situation is slightly easier, I would have to say. As mentioned, I have been head of nuclear research in Fortum for the last 5 years. But since 1st of March, I stopped in that position. I changed, and now I'm focusing purely on technology and data-driven activities and this change transformation. And I will also share you a little bit about my hobbies and my background and my personal life, since that was asked. First question was, how did I end up here? And I have no clue, really. I have 2 brothers, and I've never been good with, when I was younger, I was never really good with people. I was really good with technology, and I was really good with machines. So it was kind of easy way to start studying physics. And then I ended up in Tampere University of Technology studying technical physics, which was actually really interesting experience, since there were, I think, in physics department, there were like 30 new students every year, and there were maybe 3 women. And it was again and again, year after year, it has been the same. And it's still really low number of women entering technical physics in all of our universities. But at least what I found out, the women we have there, those are the best ones. Those are really the ones that support you. You can always ask for help. and they will always help you whatever the situation is. They will do anything for you. And that's the thing what I learned, that when we are few women in this kind of environment where most of the people are men, we have to get together and we have to support each other because we understand that it's harder for us. And at least I've seen that. I've seen that in the university, and I've seen that in the work environment as well. So it's a really interesting setup. Well, I've done a lot, so I decided when I have to share my story that I made this kind of journey. I started with the studies, the master's studies, and then I got my first job, and that was in Olkiluoto. How many of you have heard about Olkiluoto 3 project? Yeah, I guess that. I was leading the licensing, so basically the safety review of that nuclear program, then for 5 years. And it was supposed to be up and running in 2009, and then I was like, okay, I'm done, I left. And that was the first place where I ended up being in this situation when it's harder for me than for any of the guys who entered with me. They got their tasks, they got their responsibility areas right away. Nobody asked questions. And I had to fight. I was fighting and I was screaming and I was so tired sometimes in the first 3 years. Because the people there, they are mainly men. They are older and they are very much engineers. And they didn't really understand, what is that girl doing, and why is she here, and why is she telling us to do something? And I was like, every day doing the same thing, trying to get my things done. But it was only the first couple of years. And that's what I've been telling when I talk in schools and I talk with young students to get them to the technology field, that it will be hard in the beginning. But when you just get stuck with it and get it done, it turns to the other way. Because now I see that I have much more possibilities than many of the guys that I started with. I've gone so much further than where they are. Of course, some of them are there as well with me, but I noticed that many of the women, when they just keep on going, they end up in good place. And then they find that it's not that hard anymore. But it was really hard, at least for me. I was thinking many times that, why do I have to do this? And should I just change and do something else? But well, here I am. I was still in nuclear a month ago. But I ended up in this nuclear position just by an accident. I got my first summer job in VTT, so the Finnish National Research Center. And that was just a good example how you end up in places, because I didn't know anything about nuclear when I started studying. It was only kind of accident that then I got interested in nuclear technology, and then I ended up found a quite nice place to start my career, and there were a lot of education available for me in my earlier career. So it was really accident, but then I took everything out of it. Very nice things to think back. Well, then I moved forward. I had 3 kids. They are now, the oldest one is 12, just turned last week. And the next one is 10, and the youngest one is 8. So I have something to do at home. That's why I was a little bit late this morning. And well, I'm actually divorced. I divorced last year. And I have changed a lot of things, but I still try to find the best things out of this, everything, and every day is actually pretty nice. So that's really nice to have kids and nice to combine this mothership and this family together with the career. And I was also asked what I want to be when I grow old. Well, I want to be happy. I want to go forward with my career, but I don't want to only work. And I noticed from Julian's speech this morning how we work with our devices. I noticed that I do that as well. I'm at home and I try to cook and I'm checking my emails and my kids are running around and it's like, whoa, all over the place. but it's something that I noticed that sometimes you just have to let go. Just let the things be there. Your emails will wait, and you have to be present where you are. And one actual thing, what has happened to me, changed my life, and that was skydiving. I started skydiving 5 years ago, and that has totally changed my view. And I get out of my comfort zone. Earlier it was like this big. Nowadays it goes somewhere there because I jump out of airplanes and I survive. You know, find your passion and take everything out of it. Well, then when I moved forward in Fortum, I have to say a few things about Fortum. I've been there now since 2009. Not all the things are easy. Some things don't work, some things work really well. But I have found this company to be very, very open for your thoughts and very supportive if you want to, for example, educate yourself. I did my PhD while working full-time in Fortum. I found one project in the nuclear research, and my supervisor told me that, yes, you can use 30% of your time for this project, and you can do your PhD at the same time. So I finished my PhD about 4 years ago. I had 3 small kids, and I was full-time working, and then I was doing all the free time. I was writing my thesis and stuff like that. So that's why I decided that I need a new hobby and started the skydiving, because then you just have to focus on surviving and nothing else. But that was a little bit tough times, but it didn't feel like that at the moment. It only feels like that right now, so I wouldn't do it again maybe. Then one point that was also mentioned was about social media, being present and how to use that for your own purpose. And I was really lucky when I found this one colleague from IBM, from US. We were working together in some projects, and when I was doing my PhD studies, he told me one thing. Now you have one thing that you are not good at, that I checked many other PhD students doing. You are not present in social media. You have to start posting. It doesn't matter what. Just say something about nuclear and post and use Twitter or use LinkedIn or whatever you want to use and just do something. And then I started. And I actually learned how to do it in an easy way. And social media is part of my everyday life. I'm tweeting something small. It doesn't have to be huge and thought through. It's myself. It's nothing about Fortum or my family. It's totally my views and what do I feel. Some people like it, some don't. But I do have some followers there in Twitter and LinkedIn at the moment. And I also write a blog. It's called Atomimummo, which is like Adam Cranny, because I baked these cinnamon rolls in the first time when we jumped here in Malmi with my friends. So they started to call me Atomimummo, and that stayed somehow. Well, as I mentioned, I was working now for 5 years as a head of nuclear R&D. Changed that program totally in Fortum, and now I just let it go. I think my job there is done for now, and now we are building something else. But I come back to that. I also decided 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, maybe 3, that my studies are really technical. It's nuclear and it's technology and it's really technical. So I needed something for business. And then I started my executive MBA studies, finished those last year. And that was just to get also the business part to my education. And I think it was really good. But again, it happened to the same time. I started these studies, and then 2 months ago I was informed that you are selected to lead our big digital transformation in Fortum, and you are reporting to the CEO. And I'm like, okay. And I have a new puppy running around and peeing everywhere. And I have these studies that I have to attend every third week. I have to be weekend in Tampere, where I was studying. And now I have this. And I'm like, okay. Well, again, survived. But it was those things that when you start, of course, you don't want to stop. At least I don't want to stop. I want to finish what I've started. But sometimes it's hard to combine, and then you just have to ask for help. But then about this skydiving, let's see if this works. Where do I have to push to get the... Anywhere. That's me. This is really cool. Everybody should try. You just go, and then you just fall. And it's something that really, as I said, when you survive everything. Now I'm learning, I really wanted to learn to fly head down. Now you can see that I'm going head down, so the ground is over there. And it's really hard. So what I did, I was just jumping again and again and again and again, and then I got it. But that's something that I found to be my passion. But of course, everybody has their own, and you have to just find something that drives you, something that takes you away from your stressing environment and all of your tasks. Then you just let go, and then you go out and you skydive. Of course, it has changed my life other ways also. My friends now come many times from the skydiving places, and I travel around the world, and I have my gear with me, and I just go and have fun. But that's my thing. You just have to find something that drives you. Then one more thing about my role. As I said, I'm not anymore head of nuclear R&D, but I can always go back. I've been there in nuclear industry for so many years, and now in technology and digital industry, I've been for 3 years. And I have learned so much. And I was really, as I said, I was selected to lead our digital transformation in Fortum. That was 3 years ago. And it was kind of we started with our new strategy, and we started our whole company change. And we got the new CEO, and everything started to change, and they decided to have 5 different change programs. And one of them was digitalization. And I was thinking first that should I apply, because it was open position, and should I apply for this? I was thinking, I don't know really anything about digitalization. What is it? And then I Googled, and then I was trying to understand that what can be covered when you talk about the digitalization. And when we had been running a lot of AR and augmented reality and virtual reality research in our nuclear research programs, and some of the data analytics. And then I was okay, this might be part of it. So let's see, and I applied, and I got interviewed, and then the CEO interviewed me, and then that same night I sent him a link to my blog, that Atomimummo blog, that, you know, I was really nervous about this interview, and I wrote about it last week. So if you want to just have fun, so go and read. And he called me next morning. I was reading your blog for hours yesterday. I'm like, okay, what did I write there? And because I was also questioning our new strategy there earlier. I didn't believe in it, and that's why I was asking a lot of questions. Is this really what Fortum wants to be? And can we really change ourselves so much? And then he asked me that, are you now willing to stand up for our new strategy, that you can now see that something is changing? I said that, yes, I can, but I know that 99% of my colleagues in nuclear field, they still can't. They still don't see themselves in our new strategy, and we still have to do this change with them. And then he was like, okay, that's good enough. Then we have to change that. And at the same phone call, he told me that he selected me to this position. So it was really exciting, new, difficult thing. Started to understand, have these discussions. What is this digital transformation in Fortune-wide company where we have a lot of different businesses, totally different areas. But well, here we are, 2.5 years later, and we have changed a lot. We have really, it's totally different company than it was 2 years ago. And at least I have learned something. I know something about digitalization and AI and data and analytics. And what we are doing now, since I dropped the nuclear part, we will build our data and analytics center of excellence in Fortum. And that will be a big thing, a next big thing that we want to do. Of course, I'm part of GDPR. How many of you know what is GDPR? Exactly, that's what I thought. These people know, everybody knows how I have heard about GDPR. So I will be focusing on these for at least next couple of years, and then let's see. But one more thing, I also try to get out sometimes and out of reach, so I climb mountains. And this is Kilimanjaro. We did, I think it was 4 years ago. I've done a couple of mountains, and I want to get higher than 6,000 meters next time. Let's see when will that be. But it's really nice to go out. Then you have to leave your phone. It just doesn't work, and you cannot get electricity there. So it's out of battery in 1 or 2 days, anyways. So it's good place for our kind of people to get out and really leave everything behind. One more thing, then I'm done. This is the thing how I try to work, at least. Select your boss. First you select your boss, then you select your team, and then you just go and have fun. Get things done, and of course start by planning, but then go and get your hands dirty. Just like last week, we decided to build a house, summer house, to our drop zone in Utti, where we stay a lot in the summer times. So we started, I have a couple of pictures in the end, I can show you. We started with this last Wednesday, that's me. It was the first time I used that, whatever thing that is. That was Friday, Saturday, and this is Sunday. So it's just get things done when you start and get your hands dirty. Also one new thing for me, I joined Sonta. Cooperation or organization just half a year ago, and that's also something where we try to help women in technology with their education, and I'm meeting, for example, the Aalto University students who want to get known to some of the companies where they could work in the future, and how could they go forward with their careers. Also very interesting field. But I think that's it. I think I've taken a lot of time, and I've been talking about me, and it's really hard. And it's hopefully you get something out of my examples. I was really thinking about what to present here, because it's hard to give you. You are all very highly educated women, and good positions and different fields. So I was thinking, what can I give? Hopefully you got some ideas and at least view from my perspective what could be done, what could be the story. Of course, we are all individuals, and everybody's stories are a little bit different. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristiina, for joining your energetic story with us, and I'd like to echo that one as well, because just last week I discussed with a good friend of mine, Jashian, and working in data sciences, and she came from US, from a place from Austin, Texas. There is South by Southwest. Those who are more perhaps in startup and digital economy scenery knows what it's about, and she was full of energy. She said to me that, Pia, it's such a great advantage to be a woman, to be Laura in those sceneries, so and she didn't even think about it, because well, she's Nordic, or she's from Finland, and we have this thinking, of course, that we are all equal. But she really found it interesting that people are really giving her space and time, and her networking partners who were fixing her meetings were really like, having it so easy. So she made a difference out of being a woman there. So, but now, the floor is yours again, and questions to Christina, but also, Juliet, do you want to stand already now, and let's see if we have a couple of questions that we all or you two can reply. Questions to Christina or to both our great keynote speakers. Comments to share your paths in technology.
Christina, a question.
Hi.
When you mentioned in the beginning, when you started your career in tech, you felt that it was really difficult at times. What kept you going except your passion to the work you did? How did you manage through these difficult times?
I think it's a really good question. Is this working? I don't know. Yes? Okay. It's a really good question, and I'm asking myself that sometimes. The situation then was that, for example, we had this, how do you call them, sauna events. It sucks when all the guys go to sauna and then you are alone for 2 hours. And it's like, okay, yeah, great, let's team up and have this team spirit. Okay, well, I think one thing was that I don't want to give up. I'm really bad at stopping something. So it was just keep on going. And then I also found a couple of people inside of the organization who I connected with, who were really supportive. So I think that was also the key to keep on going when you have at least a couple of persons who you can go to and you say that now it's really difficult and help me and let's do things together, because it's not about me or it's not about being a woman, it's about our project. We want to get these things done and we have the common goal. So I think maybe the attitude and the few people helping.
So I'm Saila, and thank you for the very good presentations, both of you ladies. One comment, I'm close to 50, and actually I'm a Master of Science in Computer Engineering, and there were 2 ladies in my course out of 48. So that was quite sad. But what I've actually discovered during my career, which is close to 30 years by now, is that the ladies, at least my generation, female, they thought at the beginning of their careers that they have to cope alone. And they were kind of idealistics, like that I was, that I need to find my path. I need to kind of build my career without relying on the network. And it's actually just quite recently when I discovered that actually the network is everything that counts. Who knows whom? And sadly, my daughter, who is currently studying in the Newcastle University in the UK, mathematics, she thinks the same way that I used to think. She doesn't want to use any help whatsoever from anybody else, because she believes that she needs to kind of be able to find her path alone. And that is the fundamental thing that needs to change in our daughters' heads. I believe so. Any comments?
At least one comment that I see from my kids, that it's much more effective when somebody else than your own mother says it to you. So I try to use somebody else telling them things that how they could use or what they could benefit with. At least my kids, they don't really listen to me.
I think that's so true, and a completely spot-on, pragmatic answer to that question. Yeah, and I was going to say that I think we also live in an era where we do feel we have to be superhuman, and I think some of those kind of self-help manuals don't help us at all in that respect, because these kind of airport books that really do place it all on your own shoulders and make it a question of your attitude and your individual approach to your own life situation. And I think you're absolutely right that the network or collectivity or whatever it is vital. Yeah, absolutely. sharing experiences, sharing solutions, supporting each other. I mean, just the simple thing of supporting each other. I'm personally in a situation at the moment in my life where I really need a network around me. And, you know, I'm sure you are too. You know, we all are in our 50s. I wish I was just looking at 50, but I'm older. And, you know, I just think it's so important to kind of to draw on the support of other people and to say, without being vulnerable, I need help. And I actually think there's something about the culture we live in that doesn't quite allow us to be vulnerable or in any way. We have to be strong all the time. And I think we are all human beings. So but I think you're right. That's a difficult one to convey to people at the outset of their working careers. And the way to do it, I think, is, as you say, don't, you know, get someone else to do it.
And if I may add on that one, I had the pleasure of giving a speech called Tekoäly Ystävämme. So our friend Artificial Intelligence just 2 weeks ago, thanks to BWC in their event. So, and my kind of thinking, and also because I kind of come from the business perspective, Women in Tech in Finland is really about discussing, you know, how do we kind of bring the diversity and what is our assets in that context. It's not about the gender equalism discussion, that's not kind of in the core, but really celebrate the technology and make the most out of it and be good at it. But then when we look at the artificial intelligence and for example, what the founder of Alibaba, Charlie Bass, said in Davos, as well as I'm usually always looking for European futurists. So, for example, Gerrit Leonhard talked about what is the competencies and qualifications we need in the future with this. We live in harmony with our artificial intelligence, and we've seen it also in the leadership boards where things like what we think that are kind of more of a masculine type of qualifications may in the network economy be not the best assets, but those that typically are linked with kind of female behavior. We talk often about that STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Somebody puts their arts as well, but basically the question is that the machine will be better than us in all of these. So instead, what are the future competencies or that we need to cherish aside are so-called core competencies, be it compassion and compatibility, originality, reciprocity and responsiveness, and of course, empathy. Because actually, I mean, whoever believes that the singularity will be 2043 or something else, but the thing is that data analytics and the machines will help us so much that we can actually concentrate on these matters. And I think this is actually kind of the way of looking at diversity. And what, Juliet, you did, you asked from the audience that who are you in the technology-oriented field without really a tech education. And I think that was a very good question. And it leads to this one, that we need diversity in technology, not in many ways. Also based on our kind of education, and it doesn't need to be tech to be in tech industry. So that was kind of my thinking in this domain. And then one thing when we discuss about women in tech in general, as said, the gender discussion is not my cup of tea. I wouldn't be here because of that. It's just that it makes sense that women are involved, is that the discussion is engaging much more men than it tend to take like 4 years ago when I kind of got this by accident, as I told you before. And I've noticed that there is a very fruitful group of men to take part in this discussion. They are those who are fathers of daughters. So I think these, you know, like this really brings also men to this discussion. Truly, I don't know the gentlemen who dare to join here, whether you are fathers and whether you have daughters or sons, but anyhow, so this is the entrance point for perhaps discussion even at the workplace. More questions and comments from the audience to our keynote speakers.
Iris Karjula, you thank you for sharing your story, first of all. It was very interesting to hear the steps you've taken. How have you developed your leadership skills? I mean, what steps have you been taking there on that field? Because you said that originally you were very interested in technology and physics and things like that. But what is the part of the story of leadership?
Yes, very, very good point. And question, being very technology oriented, it's really hard to communicate with the people in a clear way. You probably all understand we talk about GDPRs and we talk about other things. About the leadership, we have had very good education program in Fortum that I took a couple of years ago. I think it was 6 weeks about leadership in different fields. And I've been taking these challenges where I change things. So I've been leading different kind of changes in the organization. I think it's partly the educational part, partly what I read. Of course, we all probably read a lot of this type of books. And also I think the kids, that you learn so much when you try to handle with the different age of kids and try to make them work or do something. Just yesterday they were painting the house I showed you. They were all pink, really, from here to here and here. And I think that was that has taught me a lot, that when working or dealing with the kids and different age of kids, then when you go to work, it's actually quite easy to make people to do something. You only have to say 3 times, and with the kids you have to say 10 and then take them and go. And maybe also just doing these things, making projects and working together with different teams. So maybe a little bit both. I'm not still professional in that area. I still need some practice.
More questions from the audience and comments? Yeah.
Anu Kallio and Christina, thank you for sharing your story. It's interesting. Maybe to sort of continue from what Iris was asking is we all know about and have heard about the journey that Fortum has as a company changed a lot. How would you comment on the 90% of the nuclear people that were against of everything? How would you comment on the transformation there?
I think that's in Fortum. I don't know how many of you know Fortum in more detail. We have basically 3 different businesses. We have our asset business where we just produce energy, and we have a lot of assets, and we have different types of assets. Nuclear is one big area, and then we have our consumer business where we have now 2.5 million end user consumers, and then we have our trading business in between, basically. But in nuclear, these people are hardest one to change, and it has always been like that. And I think one thing has been that in our new strategy they didn't see themselves. It was all about renewable energy and active customers and all these new hype things. Exactly, customer journeys and these. But they didn't see, because they work with engineering and they design changes to our power plants and they run the power plants. So I think we are still one step behind in our nuclear industry if we compare with many of our other business units. But still I think the people have started to change, partly because we also changed our location. Our environment from our old headquarters, this big, huge tower, to the new office premises, which is ex-Nokia building. We are there with Microsoft and Tieto, actually, nowadays. And also people are now in common areas much more. They see each other and they have to communicate with each other. So I think that's changing also the nuclear engineers much more than anything else. But of course, we have also changed our strategy slightly back. So first it was all about renewables and new things, and now we also have the traditional business there, part of the strategy. So also the strategy part has changed a little bit in the way that they can see themselves there. Because I do understand, coming from that technology or that industry, that if that is our strategy and I'm not included, where am I? And there has to be a bridge in between. But I think it's changing. It just takes a little bit more time.
With the courtesy of your time as the very important asset for us women, I thank you for participating this morning, and a special thanks to our keynote speakers and of course PwC, and we are here in the lovely presence of the Embassy of Britain, and looking forward to meeting you in very many occasions personally. And I have to run because I'm a member of the board at FIBAN, Finnish Business Angels Network, and they just had a started board meeting at 10 in further downtown. I said, I'm busy, don't you have to wait, or don't make decisions that you need me. So yes, I am the only woman in the board, like in 2 other boards, and a network from mine, a female board professional compared to me. I'm just taking my toddler steps. She said to me, Pia, I hope you know that you're often the only woman in the board, so you have to be better than men. I don't know if that's really the words that I would like to kind of end up our lovely morning, but let's celebrate the diversity. And in technology area, we women, with many educations, with different age group, from different age groups, we are definitely the ones that can bring the valuable diversity, which, as Petri told us, is a great business case. Thank you.